All right. First, I kind of want to ask you about your film kind of explores the idea of preserving human consciousness and digitally at its heart. Do you see Anima as a science fiction story about technology or as a human story about how we deal with mortality?
Definitely the latter. In many ways, I see it primarily as a road movie. Um, and along the road, the car breaks down. You got to think about where you're at in life. So I'd like to think that the film is, what the Duplass brothers call like a sci feelings movie. So it's basically like mostly a human drama that has like, we like to say it's like, a flower growing out of the sidewalk. That science fiction elements are like small but beautiful, and in many ways, this is a very near future sort of that I'm trying to depict, and grapple with myself as I'm thinking about it.
Perfect. So the film raises a fascinating question. If we could preserve the mind, should we? When you were writing the script, were you more interested in the possibilities of that technology or the emotional consequences it might have on people left behind?
Probably the latter because, you know, I'm the film tries to not comment or at least not be judgmental about anyone who starts these companies. These companies are real. There's a lot of these companies that they have not figured out how to cryostabilize the brain, and certainly we don't even know what consciousness is, for example. That's a hard place to start. So that's something I've thought a lot about. So the film tries to not judge people who might, because of great loss in their life, want to create a technology like this. Um, but I think at the same time, it asks the question of like, are we primarily material creatures or immaterial? And therefore, can you make the immaterial material? Um, and that is what is our deepest self? And can that be uploaded? I think that's a question that people are sort of asking on the fringes, but are going to be asking as we get into conversations about being interplanetary and uploading and downloading and the transhumanist movement and all that stuff. It's becoming more mainstream, but also, it's a privilege to be able to think about these things. Some people just have to put food on the table. So I think I'm hoping that the human side of it is really the core.
I do think that is. I think obviously you mentioned earlier about the road trip part of the movie. So it really unfolds as a road trip between two very different people. What drew you to the road trip movie like format as a way to explore such a philosophical idea about life, memory, and legacy?
I think partially I love to drive. I have kids. So when you have kids, the only time you're ever truly alone is driving. It's like this weird thing that I love listening to music in the car. So I think that's like my sanctuary. Filming a road movie is not a sanctuary though. It is something I don't know what I was thinking. It's very hard to do with no money, especially, um, and with a car that literally breaks down. Like we had the Jaws shark of cars. So I think I was drawn to it personally. And then there's just a great tradition. For me, Greg Mottola's The Day Trippers is like a great road movie, even though it's like mostly a running around New York movie. Um, and there's obviously like the Wim Wenders tradition that I really love. So I was hoping it would be more like in that world. It just forces you to slow down and think about life, look out the window, you know. So that
No,
feels
I agree. And one thing I do want to compliment, I did read about you, and the movie's gorgeous. Love
right.
that you shot it on film. You could really see the colors and I was sitting there watching. I was like, God, this movie is just gorgeous to look at. So thanks for
Absolutely.
shooting film.
Listen,
Uh,
I have to shout out Mateus Bastos for that on my DP. Yeah.
oh, all right, well, it looks great. So every filmmaker has that moment where the story stops being an idea and becomes something they have to make. So what was that moment when this movie came from interesting concept about consciousness to a story you felt personally compelled to tell?
Yeah, so I have to give credit to my co-story writer Brev Moss. Brev is a great writer, and I brought the idea to him originally of like, hey, I read about this company, and I've been thinking about this old parable, this rich fool idea, and all these influences, and we started to build this architecture. And really, though, when it became a movie, I had to make like the first iterations of the movie were had nothing to do with a road trip or music at all. Like that was nothing to do with it. That came later for me. as I started to write the dialogue myself and take on that part of the process. But I think it became a movie I had to make when um, I don't want to give spoilers. It became, for me, very personal and therefore something I had to make. As soon as I found a scene, a key scene where the main character turns around and goes back to this place where this important person is in his life, and there's sort of like a redemption to that. Um, all of his regret and remorse that I thought, okay, there's something in that that is very timeless, that totally transcends this genre and all the sort of like fun stuff I want to do, and says something about being a father that I really care about. And someone who deals with ambition and also like personal ambition to be a good dad and also to be a great artist. And I made a film about Flannery O'Connor that I produced a couple years ago, and she dealt with that all the time. So I think just dealing with like what is the most important type of person to be, to have like personal success or public success, and what does that look like? So that's when it became something I had to do, and it still took time to raise the money. And as you know, like get it made, it's never easy. So
Yeah, it never is. I've heard that story from many filmmakers. So,
yeah, sure.
so like one of the fascinating ideas in Anima is the possibility of processing the human mind digitally. While making the film, did your own thoughts about death or legacy change that?
Yeah. So Tarkovsky would say that, the greatest purpose of art is to prepare a person for death. And I agree with that. I think there's obviously like a nobility to entertainment that I believe in as well, but I'd like to believe that there's something about this film that um, prepares us for the inevitable and causes me, not just the audience, but me to slow down and think about what really matters. There's a concept David Brooks came up with of resume virtues and eulogy virtues. So, both are important actually, but eulogy virtues are the thing that I'm hoping the film causes people to actually consider and has caused me to think about in my own life for sure.
Wonderful. It's okay. So, for all of its ideas, the film really seemed to revolve around the connection between two people on a journey. Was there a particular scene when you realized this is what the movie is really about?
Yeah, the scene, there's a scene where they sing together. And we sent Takahiro Hira of Shogun and Monarch to piano school in Hawaii and to singing class to try to make sure that he would feel comfortable enough to do it and be genuine, even if he's not, a master singer or something. But that's when I realized for both of these characters, that's what this journey was about. The science fiction is just sort of it's like the algorithm of the movie science fiction elements is forcing them to confront their own humanity and their own past. And in this moment, they do in a very, I hope, a sensitive way and a way that's healing for them. So
I got one more question for you. So, if audiences walk out of anime at South by, the premiere at South by, and they keep thinking about a question or idea on the drive home, what do you hope that question is?
yeah, what is my best part? There's a poem that says, I am more than dust and ashes. I am my best part. I am my soul. And that was a big influence on me in making the film. And the film sort of asks the question, like, if we can come back digitally, like, what part of us comes back? So I think, like, asking the question is like, what is my deepest self? And then how do I live from that place?
Perfect. And I think I got like a few minutes left. I just want to ask you one more question. The choice to shoot on film.
Yeah.
Can you talk about it? Because I see you're part of actually an independent film company about that where y'all shoot on 65 millimeter, 16 millimeter, and 35. So talk about just shooting on film.
Yeah, so Mike, I started film school the year we went digital at USC, and it was a tragedy for me. So ever since then, I thought about what would it take to get back to that place? Because it's just, for me, I mean, I'll be honest, it's just so much more human and beautiful to me. The texture of film, it's a chemical miracle. There's really no comparison. So I co-founded this company, Cabrato, which is a celluloid-only company. We shoot exclusively on film. And so the film, of course, for me being my directorial debut, had to be on film, but 16 in particular because of the texture and the sort of imperfections of it. There's a light leak, a blue light leak in the second to last scene of the movie it plays through the whole scene. And it's like this weird angelic presence of this light. And we left it in there to say like, yeah, this is what life is like. It's not like a digital copy. It's imperfect but beautiful. So that's the idea, shooting on film.
Thanks, Brian, for your time.
Thank you,
I
Brian.
look forward to seeing you next week at South by.
Listen, man, me too. Thank you for the time.
No problem. Thank you. Hey,